Now, if it were some time ago, this Sunday would be a different Sunday in its title. You wouldn't see on the hymn board the fifth Sunday in Lent, and you wouldn't see on the front of the bulletin that same title. You'd see a different title, because Lent would essentially be over. No, it wouldn't be Easter Sunday. We would actually be entering into yet another season. Lent would be essentially turning its emphasis away from our inner journey, our inner look at ourselves, our disciplines, our self-examination, as the church asks us to begin to look outward a bit, outward toward another kind of journey, a journey that Jesus is taking, a journey toward the cross. Today would be, in that day, the first Sunday in Passion Time. Vestments would have changed color, all of that. But about 50, 60, 70 now years ago, the liturgical renewal of the mid-20th century, we rearranged the calendar, we changed some of the titles of the days, but the liturgy, the worship, didn't really change because the lessons appointed for these days stayed the same. And so today, we hear in these lessons really that shift as Jesus begins to talk about the imminence of his suffering and death. As we hear him use a metaphor to speak about what he is about to undergo as he looks toward his death in Jerusalem. Again, we hear the language of him being lifted up on the cross, lifted up in the mission that he came to undertake for our sakes. But he uses a metaphor that is worthy of our consideration. A metaphor about a seed that is dropped into the earth and dies. Now, most of us don't think about a seed dying when we plant it. Most of us plant a seed in anticipation of something else. Most of us plant a seed in anticipation of getting a beautiful flower, or maybe a tree, some great fruit, or maybe some grain, or maybe some vegetables. It's that time of year, after all. We're trying to germinate some seeds. Some of us in our basements or under our grow lamps. Some of us who are a little bit more aggressive are maybe already clawing at the earth and trying to drop some seeds in there. But few of us think that we're in the process of killing anything. In fact, we think we're trying to bring life. But that's in fact what Jesus is talking about, that in order for the seed to produce this life, the seed must die, which gives us a clue to something that's very, very important. Because when we think of death, we think of the end of something. Jesus is teaching us something critically important. That death is not the end of anything at all. But rather, death is a transition in life. Death is part of the ongoing process of living. And so when we plant a seed, what happens is it begins a new phase of its life. And so he takes that and he moves it forward for us to understand a bit about our spiritual life has to be about. You see, because if we plant a seed and we don't expect it to die, and to produce fruit. Why did we plant it in the first place? Why do we live this life and expect to hold on to it the way we have it? But that's the way we live life most of the time. We hold on to everything we can. We grasp on to everything this world has to offer us. In fact, we gather more and more of it, and we grab onto it, and we hold on to it. Bear with me a bit. I know this is kind of a stretch of the metaphor, a bit much for some, but think of yourself as a seed. What is a seed, after all? A seed is this little husk, and inside the little husk is the beginning of a plant. And what happens when we plant the seed? Well, we put it in the ground, put it in some soil, and we water it. We make sure it has warmth. And all of that is so that the husk around it becomes soft. And it starts to deteriorate. And it becomes soft enough so that the plant inside can break out of it. And eventually it just falls to the side and disappears. It just disappears. Unfortunately for us, if we are that seed, the world teaches us that we're supposed to grab it all and hold on to it for dear life. So if we are that life inside of this husk, imagine, for example, that you're a seed, and this life is a husk all around us, and we have handles on the inside. And what we're doing is holding on to those handles. And no matter how hard God is trying to get through His grace and love, trying to soften that husk, trying to make it fall off of us so that we can emerge from it, we are holding on to those handles for dear life. We're just holding on so tight, so tight, so tight, we don't want to let it go. We don't want to let God in. And all Jesus is telling us is, let go. Let go. Let God's love in. Let God's grace soften that hard shell all around you. Let it fall away, so that that beautiful thing that God has created inside of it can emerge and begin to grow into something marvelous, more than you can ever expect. How many of you have ever had the privilege of standing before the great sequoia tree? Or ever even seen a photograph of one and imagined yourself standing there? Imagine that. That gargantuan tree came from that tiny little seed. But you see, it was planted, whether by someone else or by nature. And the circumstances were right. The soil was there. The moisture, the warmth, the husk fell away, and that tree began to grow. Slowly, bit by bit, inch by inch. And it took hundreds and hundreds of years to be through. But it has grown into this marvelous reality. When Jesus said, unless you hate your life in this world, you will never find everlasting life. This is what he's saying. If you love your life in this world, you will lose it. Because what you are then is a seed that never grows. And if you know anything about seed, you just leave it on a shelf. Year after year after year. Not only does it grow, but the seed itself dies. You try to plant it, it'll never germinate. It's dead. That can be us, too. If the life that God puts deep in us is never nurtured, is never allowed to flourish, if we simply hold on to that husk, to the things of this world, and we never allow the love and the grace of God inside of us to nourish us by letting go of the things of this world, we will never know the joy that can be ours. This is the promise of the Father. This was the promise that the Father gave to the Son. This is what, when Jesus says, "Follow me," he promises to show us. He never promises it's going to be easy. That journey sometimes is very, very hard. That journey sometimes requires of us great sacrifice. But in the end, that journey creates life in a way that we cannot imagine. That is the journey that, though it led to Calvary, and though it led to the cross, and though it led to great suffering on the part of Jesus, led to Easter Sunday. That is the journey that led to a life transformed, that led to a life of resurrection, that led to a life that would never end. That's the promise of the Father. That's the promise that is yours and mine. Follow me, Jesus said. Follow this way. It may not be easy, but it's worth it. Follow me. Let it go. Allow me to show you the way. Stay with me. Pray with me. Live with me. And live forever. What will you choose? These days are upon us. It is time for the Passion. It is time for the cross. Will you take yours up? Will you follow the path of Jesus? Will you accept yours? Because if you do, there is a great promise waiting. You will grow. Your seed, which is within you, is nothing less than the life of God himself. And no one can destroy this. This is your life. Let it go.